The morning sun filtered through my curtains, bathing my room in a soft golden glow. I woke slowly, still numb from a deep sleep. Mechanically, my hand searched for my long hair, these curls that I cherished so much. But something was wrong. The familiar weight of my hair was gone. Panic suddenly invades me, driving away the last mists of sleep. I sat up abruptly, my heart racing. My eyes landed on the full-length mirror that sat opposite my bed. What I saw confirmed my worst fears. My hair had been cut. And not just anyhow. It was a disaster, an uneven cut with jagged edges that left me looking like I'd been attacked by a drunk gardener with a lawn mower. I stood frozen, unable to take my eyes off my reflection. How was this possible? Who dared to do such a thing? I felt violated, betrayed. My hair was more than just an adornment to me. They were a part of my identity, a legacy from my mother who always had beautiful hair. Tears welled up in my eyes as I realized the extent of the damage. It was then that I noticed a small envelope lying on my nightstand. His presence was both disturbing and infuriating. With trembling hands, I opened it to discover a note scribbled in the unmistakable handwriting of my mother-in-law, Martine. "It's for your own good, darling. I told you to stop wasting money on this nonsense," the message read. The words hurt me more deeply than the loss of my hair. It was a betrayal from someone I had, reluctantly, come to accept as family. My name is Sophie, and I am 28 years old. Martine entered my life 5 years ago, when I married her son, Thomas. From the beginning, our relationship has been complicated. Martine has always had difficulty accepting that another woman would take an important place in her son's life. She constantly criticized my choices, my way of dressing, of running the house, and even my career as a freelance graphic designer, which she considered unstable. Sitting on my bed, I thought about all the tense moments we had experienced. The family meals ruined by her derogatory remarks, the Christmas parties where she gave me useful gifts like books on the art of being a good wife. But never, ever, would I have imagined that she would go so far as to physically attack me. Anger began to replace the initial shock. Martine's audacity fueled a fire within me, transforming my astonishment into seething rage. How dare she? By what right did she assume the power to decide on my appearance? I got up and started pacing around my room, my mind racing. I couldn't let this go. I had to react, to show her that she couldn't treat me like that. An idea was brewing in my mind, the beginning of a plan that would take shape over the hours and days to come. I silently made a promise to myself that this act would not go unpunished. Martine was going to learn a lesson she would never forget. My revenge would be equal to the affront she had inflicted on me. Determined, I headed to the bathroom to assess the damage in more detail. The mirror reflected back to me the image of a woman that I struggled to recognize. My long brown hair that usually cascaded over my shoulders had been reduced to a rough bob that barely reached past my ears. Longer strands remained in places, giving the whole thing a chaotic and unkempt appearance. I ran my fingers through what was left of my hair, feeling the tears running down my cheeks. 5 years. That's how long it took me to grow my hair to my waist. 5 years of attentive care, nourishing masks and regular cuts to maintain my hair pride. All of this was reduced to nothing in one night by my mother-in-law's madness. The worst part of all this was that Thomas was on a business trip for the week. He would not return until Sunday evening, leaving me alone to face this nightmarish situation. I knew he would be furious with his mother when he found out what she had done, but for now I was on my own. I took a quick shower, trying as best I could to tame what was left of my hair. On my way out, I grabbed my phone and called my friend Chloe. She was a hairdresser and I knew she could help me fix this hair disaster. "Hello, Chloe. It's Sophie. I need your help urgently," I said as soon as she answered. "Sophie, what's going on? You look upset," she replied, worried. I quickly explained the situation to him, my voice cracking at times with emotion. Chloe let out a cry of indignation when I told her what Martine had done. "This old bitch is completely crazy. Don't worry, my dear. Come to the living room as soon as you can. We'll sort it out, I promise." Reassured by my friend's support, I quickly got dressed and left the apartment. As I crossed the streets of my Parisian neighborhood, I couldn't help but think that everyone was looking at me. I lowered my head, trying to be as discreet as possible. Chloe's hair salon was a few blocks from my house, on a small cobblestone street in the Marais. When I entered, the doorbell jingled happily, contrasting with my somber mood. Chloe immediately came to meet me, her eyes widening when she saw the extent of the damage. "Oh, my poor darling," she whispered, taking me in her arms. "Come on, we'll take care of you right away." For the next 2 hours, Chloe worked her magic. She cut, leveled, sculpted. Little by little, I saw a new hairstyle take shape. It wasn't my long hair of yesteryear, but it was sleek, modern, and most importantly, intentional. "There you go," Chloe finally exclaimed, handing me a mirror. "What do you think?" I stared at my reflection, surprised by what I saw. My hair was now cut into a sophisticated plunging bob that highlighted the structure of my face. It was different, sure, but not unpleasant. Wow, I said, still in shock. "You have done miracles, Chloe. Thank you so much." My friend hugged me again. "You're welcome, sweetheart. Now, let's talk about what we're going to do about your mother-in-law." So, sitting in the back room of the salon, Chloe and I began to develop a plan. Revenge was going to be sweet, and Martine was not going to know what was going to happen to her. Determined to regain my dignity and teach my mother-in-law a lesson, I began to hatch a plan. My mind was buzzing with possibilities, each more elaborate than the last. I considered everything from harmless pranks to more serious consequences, but ultimately settled on a ploy that would both humiliate and amuse. Back home after my visit to Chloe, I sat down at my desk, notebook in hand, ready to write down my ideas. The afternoon sun bathed my small Parisian apartment in golden light, contrasting with the dark thoughts that inhabited me. I thought about all the times Martine had belittled me, criticized me, or simply ignored me. Each memory fueled my determination. I spent the next few days gathering supplies and enlisting the help of a few trusted friends. We would meet in secret, whispering conspiratorially while perfecting the perfect plan. My friends were eager to help, each putting their own twist on the scheme, which involved a carefully orchestrated series of events designed to catch my mother-in-law off guard. The plan would take place over a weekend when Thomas would conveniently be on a business trip. This would ensure that Martine would be alone, without distractions or witnesses to interfere. With everything in place, I felt a mix of excitement and apprehension. Would my plan succeed or would it backfire disastrously? On Thursday evening, I met Chloe, my fry, Nd Amélie and my cousin Lucas at the Café des Artistes, our usual hangout in the Montmartre district. The place was crowded, as always, filled with the hubbub of conversation and the clinking of glasses. We sat in a discreet corner, away from prying ears. "So, Sophie, tell us everything," said Amélie, sipping her glass of red wine. "What is this brilliant plan you told us about?" I glanced around to make sure no one was listening, then leaned forward. "This is what I imagined," I began in a low voice. I explained my plan to them in detail. It would be a series of seemingly fortuitous events that would make Martine's life impossible for an entire weekend. Everyone had a role to play. "Chloe, I'll need your hairstyling skills," I said, turning to my friend. "Remember that temporary coloring shampoo you told me about? The one that goes away after a few washes?" Chloe nodded, a mischievous smile on her lips. "Oh yes, I see where you're going with this. What color do you have in mind?" "Neon pink," I replied without hesitation. "As garish as possible." We all burst out laughing as we imagined Martine's head with candy pink hair. "Amélie," I continued, "you still work at the theater, don't you? Do you think you could lend us some props?" Amélie, who was a costume designer for a theater company, agreed enthusiastically. "Of course. What do you need?" I detailed my list to him: a wig, stage makeup, and some costumes. She promised to bring everything back to me the next day. "And you, Lucas," I said, turning to my cousin, "I'll need your handyman skills. Do you think you could tinker with some household appliances?" Lucas, who was an electronics engineer, smirked. "No problem, cousin. These devices are going to have some interesting malfunctions." We spent the next 2 hours perfecting every detail of the plan. Each event was carefully timed, each action carefully coordinated. At the end of the evening, we had a complete action plan, worthy of the best heist films. On Friday evening, as Thomas left for his business trip, I put the first phase of the plan into action. I invited Martine to spend the weekend with us, claiming that I felt alone and needed advice on redecorating the apartment. Knowing her taste for control and her belief in being an interior design expert, I knew she wouldn't be able to resist. As planned, Martine arrived Saturday morning, her suitcases filled with decoration magazines and fabric samples. I greeted her with a forced smile, playing the role of the grateful daughter-in-law. "Oh, Martine, I'm so glad you could come," I said, helping her carry her luggage. "I really need your wise advice." Martine entered the apartment with a confident step, casting a critical look around her. "Well, my dear, it's about time someone took care of this place. Those curtains are awful, and let's not even mention that couch." I gritted my teeth, suppressing the urge to tell him what I really thought of his questionable taste in decorating. Instead, I gave him a big smile. "You are so right, Martine. What would I do without you?" I led her to the guest bedroom, where I had already placed Chloe's special shampoo in the adjoining bathroom. "Make yourself comfortable," I said. "I'll make breakfast while you freshen up." As soon as I heard the shower running, I rushed into the kitchen to set up the next phase of the plan. Lucas had tinkered with the coffee maker the day before, so that it would only produce an undrinkable liquid that vaguely resembled coffee. A few minutes later, a shrill scream echoed throughout the apartment. I held back a smile, knowing very well what had just happened. Martine stormed out of the bathroom, a towel wrapped around her head. "Sophie, come here immediately." I rushed towards her, feigning concern. "What's going on, Martine? Are you okay?" She tore the towel off her head, revealing bright pink hair. "Look what your shampoo did to my hair," she screamed. I put a hand to my mouth, feigning surprise. "Oh my God, Martine, I'm sorry, I don't understand what could have happened." "It's my usual shampoo, I assure you." Martine fumed, her cheeks almost as pink as her hair. "It's impossible. You must have got the wrong bottle or something. We have to do something." I nodded, looking contrite. "Of course, don't worry. I'll call the hairdresser right away to make an emergency appointment." While Martine returned to the bathroom, probably to try to wash off this improbable color, I called Chloe as agreed. She played her role perfectly, informing me that the salon was full for the day and that she would not be able to see us until Monday. The rest of the morning went according to our plan. The coffee maker only produced a foul beverage, the toaster refused to work, and the television mysteriously only received channels in foreign languages. Martine, already on edge because of her hair, became more and more agitated as the hours went by. Each new incident was met with exclamations of disbelief and suspicious glances in my direction. "I don't understand," she repeated. "How is it possible for everything to fail at once?" I shrugged my shoulders, playing innocent. "I don't know, Martine. It's really an incredible run of bad luck." In the afternoon we went out to do some shopping for dinner. I had planned to invite a few friends for a friendly evening, just to add to Martine's embarrassment. In the street, people turned around as we passed, intrigued by my mother-in-law's bright pink hair. "Stop looking at me like that," Martine hissed through her teeth as we entered the supermarket. "Like what?" I asked innocently. "As if you find it amusing," she replied. "I know you're behind this, one way or another." I feigned indignation. "Martine, how can you say such a thing? I am as upset as you by all these incidents." She glared at me but said nothing more. We finished our shopping in tense silence. Back at the apartment, I started preparing dinner while Martine locked herself in her room, probably to try once again to get rid of her new hair color. In the evening, my friends arrived for dinner. Chloe, Amelie, and Lucas played their roles perfectly, pretending to discover Martine's new hairstyle with amazement. "Oh, Martine," Amelie exclaimed with exaggerated enthusiasm. "What audacity! This pink looks great on you." Martine grimaced with a smile, visibly uncomfortable. "That wasn't really intentional," she muttered. The dinner took place in a strange atmosphere, a mixture of tension and contained hilarity. My friends exchanged knowing glances, while Martine seemed more and more suspicious. As I cleared the table, I couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt. Certainly, Martine had wronged me, but was this really the right way to resolve things? I quickly chased away these thoughts. It was too late to turn back now. The evening was coming to an end, and I had saved the best for last. I invited everyone to sit in the living room for a surprise. I put together a little slideshow of family photos. I announced with an innocent smile. I thought it would be fun to reminisce on some good memories. Martine visibly stiffened in her seat. I launched the presentation, holding my breath. The long-awaited weekend finally arrived, bringing with it the perfect opportunity to put my plan into action. I woke up at dawn, my heart pounding with anticipation. Martine, unaware of the impending chaos, went about her morning activities as usual. The first phase of the plan invo. LVED, a harmless but effective prank, a special shampoo that would temporarily dye my mother-in-law's hair a shocking shade of bright pink. While Martine was taking a shower, the house echoed with her surprised cries when she saw her reflection in the bathroom mirror. She stormed out, a towel wrapped around her head, demanding an explanation. Feigning innocence, I offered him a sympathetic ear, secretly savoring the success of this first step. "Oh my God, Martine," I exclaimed with feigned concern. "I don't understand what could have happened. It's my usual shampoo, I assure you." Martine fumed, her cheeks almost as pink as her hair. "It's impossible. You must have got the wrong bottle or something. We have to do something." I nodded, looking contrite. "Of course, don't worry. I'll call the hairdresser right away to make an emergency appointment." While Martine returned to the bathroom, probably to try to wash off this improbable color, I called Chloe as agreed. She played her role perfectly, informing me that the salon was full for the day and that she would not be able to see us until Monday. The day continued with a series of small annoyances, each carefully designed to frustrate and unsettle my mother-in-law. From misplaced keys to items mysteriously disappearing, the house seemed to be conspiring against her. Each incident was greeted with a knowing smile on my part, while I watched with satisfaction as Martine's patience crumbled. "I don't understand," she repeated. "How is it possible for everything to fail at once?" I shrugged my shoulders, playing innocent. "I don't know, Martine. It's really an incredible run of bad luck." To add to his discomfort, I had invited a few friends over for an impromptu lunch. Chloe, Amelie, and Lucas arrived around noon, playing their role perfectly by feigning surprise at Martine's new hair color. "Oh, Martine," Amelie exclaimed with exaggerated enthusiasm. "What audacity! This pink looks great on you." Martine grimaced with a smile, visibly uncomfortable. "That wasn't really intentional," she muttered. Lunch took place in a strange atmosphere, a mixture of tension and contained hilarity. My friends exchanged knowing glances, while Martine seemed more and more suspicious. I had prepared a gratin dauphinois, Martine's favorite dish, but I had deliberately omitted the salt, making the dish bland and unappetizing. "Sophie, my darling," said Martine, pushing away her plate, "I think you forgot to season the gratin." I feigned surprise. "Really? Oh, I'm sorry. I was so distracted this morning. Maybe all these little incidents confused me." In the afternoon, we decided to go out for a walk in the neighborhood. I had carefully planned our route to pass Chloe's hair salon, which was closed that day as planned. Martine, seeing the living room, insisted that we stop. "Look, Sophie, the salon is open. I'll be able to do something for my hair." I held back a smile. "I'm sorry, Martine, but Chloe told me on the phone this morning that they were closed today for training." Martine frowned, clearly upset. "But the lights are on. I see people inside." In fact, I had asked a few of Chloe's friends to pretend to work in the closed living room, just for this occasion. "This must be the training Chloe told me about," I said soothingly. "Don't worry, we'll find a solution for your hair." We continued our walk, Martine attracting astonished looks from passers-by with her flamboyant pink hair. I could see his unease growing around every corner. Back at the apartment, I suggested that Martine watch a film to relax. I had prepared a selection of classic French comedies, knowing full well that the DVD player had been tampered with by Lucas to only play black and white horror films. What would you say about Con's dinner? I asked innocently. Martine nodded, settling comfortably on the sofa. But as soon as I put the DVD on, the screen lit up with a scary scene from an old horror movie. Martine jumped. Sophie, this is the wrong movie. I feigned confusion. Oh, that's strange. Let me try another DVD. But every DVD we tried produced the same result, black and white horror scenes. After several unsuccessful attempts, Martine gave up on the idea of watching a film. I think I'll go and rest a little in my room, she said, visibly tired and irritated by all these incidents. As soon as she was gone, I began preparing for the final phase of my plan, a dinner I had organized under the pretext of reconciliation. Martine, wanting to regain some semblance of normality, had agreed to attend. The table was carefully set, and the atmosphere seemed calm, in stark contrast to the chaos of the day. My friends arrived for dinner, bringing with them a cheerful atmosphere that contrasted with Martine's sullen mood. I had prepared an elaborate meal, a warm goat's cheese salad as a starter, followed by beef bourguignon and a cheese platter. For dessert, I ordered a strawberry tart from the best pastry chef in the neighborhood. As the evening progressed, Martine began to relax, lulled by a false sense of security. It was then that the final blow of my revenge took place. I had prepared a slideshow of family photos, ostensibly to celebrate our shared memories. However, I had edited the images to include humorous captions and exaggerated hairstyles, each more ridiculous than the last. I have a little surprise, I announced, getting up to turn on the projector. I put together a slideshow of our best family moments. Martine visibly stiffened, probably worried about what was coming next. The slideshow started innocently, showing classic family photos. Then, gradually, the images became more and more absurd. A photo of Martine from Thomas and I's wedding appeared, but her hair had been photoshopped into a dramatic punk hairstyle. "Oh, Martine, I didn't remember that you dared to wear this hairstyle for the wedding," Chloe exclaimed, playing the game to perfection. Martine opened her mouth to protest, but was interrupted by the appearance of the next photo. This time it was a picture from our last family Christmas, but everyone in the family had haircuts identical to the one Martine had inflicted on me. The room burst into laughter as Martine watched, speechless, as the screen displayed photo after photo of increasingly ridiculous situations. There were images of her with impossible hairstyles, humorous captions recalling her most acerbic remarks, and even a series of photos showing the evolution of her passion for hair, culminating with an image of her holding comically a lawn mower. At first, Martine looked like she was about to explode with anger. But to my surprise, as the slideshow progressed, I saw a subtle change take place in his face. The corners of her mouth began to turn up slightly, and soon she joined in the laughter, at first shyly, then more and more openly. When the last slide faded, leaving a white screen, a silence settled over the room. All eyes were glued to Martine, waiting for her reaction. She took a deep breath, then turned to me. "Sophie," she said, her voice shaking slightly, "I have to admit, you got me. It was unexpected." I held my breath, unsure of what was coming next. Martine continued, "I guess I deserved that, after what I did to you. I'm sorry. For your hair, and for everything else." The sincerity in his voice took me by surprise. I had prepared myself for anger, for indignation, but not for an apology. I felt my own anger melt away, replaced by a feeling I never thought I would feel towards Martine: compassion. "I'm sorry too," I said softly. "I should have talked to you about it directly instead of making this whole thing up." An awkward silence settled over the room. Then, against all expectations, Martine burst out laughing. "You know what?" she said, running a hand through her bright pink hair. "I'm almost getting used to it. Maybe I'll keep it like this after all." The tension in the room instantly dissipated, replaced by general laughter. Even I couldn't help but laugh. The evening ended on a surprisingly positive note, with Martine recognizing the ingenuity of my plan and even complimenting my sense of humor. As my friends left and we started to clean up, I realized something had changed. The tension that had always defined our interactions had been replaced by mutual respect and new understanding. We still had a long way to go, but for the first time, I felt like there was hope for our relationship. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about the events of the day. What started as revenge had turned into something unexpected, an opportunity for reconciliation. I fell asleep with the feeling that, perhaps, things were finally going to improve between Martine and me. The next morning, I woke up with a mixture of apprehension and hope. The events of the day before had taken an unexpected turn, and I didn't really know what to expect for this last day with Martine. I went down to the kitchen, still in my pajamas, to prepare breakfast. To my surprise, Martine was already there, sitting at the table with a steaming cup of coffee in front of her. Her hair, still a bright pink, was styled into a sleek bun. She looked up as I arrived and gave me a hesitant smile. "Hello, Sophie," she said softly. "I made some coffee, if you want some." I blinked, momentarily taken aback by this unusually pleasant Martine. "Thank you," I replied, pouring myself a cup. "Did you sleep well?" Martine nodded. "Surprisingly well, yes. Sophie, I think we should talk about what happened yesterday." I sat across from her, mentally preparing myself for the difficult conversation that was to follow. But Martine surprised me once again. "I wanted to thank you," she said, catching me completely off guard. "Thank me?" I repeated, incredulous. Martine took a deep breath. "Yes. What you did, it was bold, creative, and downright hilarious. It made me realize how insufferable I've been to you all these years." I remained silent, not knowing how to react to this unexpected confession. Martine continued, "I know I haven't been the easiest stepmother to get along with. I was so focused on protecting Thomas that I didn't realize how much I was hurting you in the process." His words touched me more than I could have imagined. All the anger and frustration I had built up over the years seemed to dissipate, giving way to a feeling of mutual understanding. "Martine," I began, choosing my words carefully, "I thank you for these words. I must admit that I did not expect such a reaction from you." She gave a little laugh. "Believe me, I'm the first surprise. But you know, seeing all those photos last night, even though they were edited ridiculously, made me realize how much I missed precious moments with you too because of my attitude." We spent the next hour talking openly, sharing our perspectives and finding common ground. For the first time since I'd known Martine, I felt like I really saw her, not as the intimidating stepmother she'd always been, but as a woman with her own insecurities and struggles. "You know," said Martine, sipping her coffee, "when Thomas told me that he was going to get married, I was afraid. Fear of losing my son, fear of no longer having my place in his life. Guess I projected all those fears onto you." I nodded, finally understanding where his behavior was coming from. "I never wanted to take your place, Martine. I just hoped that we could form a united family." Martine held out her hand and put it on mine, a gesture that would have seemed unthinkable for me a few days earlier. "I know this now, and I'm sorry to have taken him so long." After breakfast, we decided to take a walk in the neighborhood. This time, Martine no longer seemed embarrassed by her pink hair. On the contrary, she walked her head high, smiling with the curious eyes of passers-by. "What do you know?" she said while we stopped in a small coffee to have hot chocolate. "I think I'm going to keep this color a little. It gives me an air, bold." I burst out laughing. "Who are you and what did you do with my mother-in-law?" Martine laughs in turn. "Let's just say that I decided it was time to get out of my comfort zone." In the afternoon, we returned to the apartment to prepare a surprise for Thomas, who was to return the same evening. Martine offered to cook together, a first in our relationship. We opt for a wine rooster, Thomas' favorite dish. While we cook, Martine told me anecdotes on Thomas Arnfarn, stories that I had never heard before. I realized how much I had deemed Martine without really knowing her, just as she did with me. "You know," said Martine, stirring the sauce, "Thomas has always been a sensitive child. When he was 8 years old, he brought back to the house an injured bird he had found in the garden. He spent weeks to treat him, even getting up at night to feed him." I smile, perfectly recognizing the Thomas that I knew in this description. "He hasn't changed," I said gently. "This is one of the reasons why I fell in love with him." Martine looked at me with a mixture of tenderness and regret. "I'm happy he found you, Sophie. Really. I should have seen him earlier. but you are exactly what he needs." These words touched me deeply. It was the first time that Martine has expressed her approval from our marriage so explicitly. As evening fell, we heard the key turning in the lock. Thomas was back. Martine and I exchanged an accomplice look before I head towards the entrance. Thomas' reaction when he saw his mother with pink hair was invaluable. His eyes moved comically, passing from Martine to me and vice versa. "Mom, how?" "Sophie," he stamped, visibly lost. Martine and I shone with laughter simultaneously, which only added to the confusion of Thomas. "Come, my darling," said Martine, taking her son by the arm. "We have a lot to tell you." During dinner, we raised the events of the last 2 days to Thomas, from the disastrous haircut to the hilarious slideshow. At first, Thomas seemed horrified, but as the story progresses, his expression relaxed and he ended up laughing with us. "I must say," he said, shaking the head of disbelief, "that I did not expect to come back to find my mother and my wife accomplices like college students." "Life is full of surprises, my darling," replied Martine with a wink. After dinner, as we had coffee in the living room, Thomas took me apart. "Sophie," he said slowly, "I don't know how you did it, but thank you. I have never seen my mother so relaxed and happy." I smile, feeling a wave of happiness invade me. I believe that we both needed this experience to see beyond our prejudices. The rest of the evening went in a warm and relaxed atmosphere that I would never have thought possible with Martine. We talked about everything and nothing, laughing at old family stories and making projects for the future. When the moment came to Martine to leave, I was surprised to feel a touch of sadness. She took me in her arms, a gesture that seemed to me both strange and comforting. "Thank you, Sophie," she whispered. "For the lesson, for forgiveness, for everything." I gave him his embrace, feeling that something had changed deeply between us. "Thank you, Martine, for laughing at yourself and for opening your heart." As we watched Martine's car move away, Thomas passed an arm around my shoulders. "Are you really extraordinary? Do you know that?" he said, kissing me on the temple. I smile, thinking about everything that had happened. I think we are all, in our own way. Sometimes it is enough for a little help, or a failed haircut. That night, lying in our bed, I thought about the incredible transformation that had taken place in the space of a few days. What had started as an act of revenge had turned into an opportunity for growth and reconciliation. I realized that sometimes the most difficult relationships are those that most need to be worked, and that behind the most annoying behaviors are often hidden from insecurity and fears that we all share. As I started to fall asleep, I promised to continue to cultivate this new relationship with Martine. It was only the beginning of a new chapter, and I was looking forward to seeing where he would take us. The days that followed were like a waking dream. The transformation of my relationship with Martine seemed almost too beautiful to be true. I woke up every morning wondering if all this had not been that an illusion, a product of my overflowing imagination. However, the reality of our new dynamic was confirmed the following Wednesday. I was in my office at home, working on a graphic design project for a customer, when my phone rang. Martine's name appeared on the screen, causing me a mixture of excitement and apprehension. "Hello, Martine," I replied, wondering what could motivate this unexpected call. "Sophie, my darling," she said, her unusually soft voice. "I hope I don't mind. I was wondering if you would accept lunch with me today. I would like to talk to you about something important." Intrigued, I accepted his invitation. We met in a small bistro in the neighborhood, Le Petit Parisien, renowned for its delicious quiches and fresh salads. When I arrived at the restaurant, Martine was already there, sitting at a table near the window. Her hair had found their natural color, an elegant chestnut dotted with a few gray wicks. She seemed nervous, playing distractedly with the towel placed in front of her. "Sophie," she said, getting up to welcome me with a kiss, a gesture that surprised me pleasantly. "I'm glad you could come." We ordered our dishes, a Lorraine quiche for me, a nice salad for Martine, and chatter of things and others while waiting for our plates to arrive. Martine asked me questions about my work, showing sincere interest that I had never known her before. It was only after the arrival of our dishes that Martine tackled the subject that seemed to be close to her heart. "Sophie," she started, putting her fork and looking straight in the eyes. I wanted to see you today to introduce you formal excuses. I remained silent, surprised by this unexpected declaration. Martine continued. What I did, by cutting your hair without your consent, was inexcusable. I violated your intimacy and your autonomy in a way that I cannot even start to justify. I am deeply, sincerely sorry. His words touched me deeply. I felt the tears getting into my eyes, but I got them back, not wanting to spoil this moment. That's not all, continued Martine. I want to apologize for my behavior towards you since you entered Thomas' life. I was critical, condescending, and often cruel. I left my fear of losing my son obscure my judgment and preventing me to see the extraordinary woman you are. I took a deep inspiration, trying to master the emotion that invaded me. Martine, I say gently, I don't know what to say. Your apologies mean a lot to me. Martine held out her hand over the table and took mine, a gesture that would have seemed unthinkable for me a few weeks earlier. You don't have to say anything, my darling. I just wanted you to know how much I regret my past actions. I hope you can forgive me and that we can start on new bases. I squeezed his hand in return, feeling a huge weight getting up of my shoulders. Of course I forgive you, Martine. I think we both learned a lot from this experience. We passed the rest of the lunch to discuss openly, sharing our perspectives and our hopes for the future. Martine told me about her own relationship with her mother-in-law, a cold and distant woman who had always made her feel inadequate. I guess I unconsciously reproduced this scheme with you, she admits. But I want to do better. I want to be the kind of stepmother I would have liked to have. After lunch, we decided to walk in the nearby Tuileries garden. The June sun bathed the aisles with a golden light, and the air was scented by the roses in bloom. You know, said Martine when we sit on a bench against the fountain, I never really took the time to get to know you. Tell me a little more about you, on your life before to meet Thomas. I was touched by his sincere interest. I told him about my childhood in the south of France, my studies of arts applied in Paris, my dreams and my aspirations. Martine listened to me carefully, asking relevant questions and laughing at my anecdotes. You are a fascinating woman, Sophie, she said finally. I regret having taken so long to realize it. The rest of the afternoon passed as in a dream. We strolled in the streets of Paris, stopping in a small bookstore where Martine offered me a book on the history of art, remembering that I had mentioned my interest in the subject. As the sun began to decline, we headed for the metro. Before you separate, Martine took me in her arms, hugging me strongly. Thank you, Sophie, she whispered. For this day, for your forgiveness, to be the wonderful woman that you are. I gave him his embrace, feeling a wave of emotion overwhelming me. Thank you, Martine. For your apologies, for your open-mindedness, for this new chance that we give ourselves. On the way back, I think about the incredible transformation that had taken place in such a short time. What had started as an act of revenge had turned into an opportunity for healing and growth for both of us. Going home, I found Thomas in the living room, working on his laptop. He looked up when I arrived, smiling when he saw my radiant expression. Good day, he asked. I sit next to him on the sofa, putting my head on his shoulder. You have no idea, I replied before telling her about my day with his mother. Thomas listened to me carefully, his face moving from surprise to joy as my story progresses. I can't believe it, he said when I finished. My mother who apologizes? Who offers you a book? Who wants to get to know you? Is it as if I had entered a parallel dimension? I laugh, fully understanding its disbelief. I know, it's surreal. But it's real, Thomas. Your mother has really changed. He hugged me, placing a kiss on my forehead. I'm so happy, he whispered. I no longer dared to hope that you could one day hear you. That evening, lying in our bed, I thought about everything that had happened in recent days. The disastrous haircut, my elaborate revenge, the unexpected reaction of Martine, and now these sincere excuses and this wonderful day. I realized that sometimes the most disturbing events in our lives can lead to the most positive changes. If Martine had not cut my hair that day, we would probably still be locked up in our toxic dynamics, unable to see beyond our prejudices and our feelings. This experience had taught me the importance of forgiveness, open communication, and the desire to change. She had shown me that even the most difficult relationships can be transformed if the two parties are ready to make the effort. As I started to fall asleep, I felt full of hope for the future. I knew that our relationship with Martine would not always be perfect, that there would probably still be moments of tension and disagreement. But we now had a solid base on which to build, a mutual understanding and a respect that would help us to overcome obstacles. I fall asleep with a smile on his lips, impatient to see what the future has in store for us, in Martine and I, in this new phase of our relationship. The weeks that followed were like a whirlwind of positive changes and new experiences. My relationship with Martine continued to flourish in a way that I would never have thought possible before. Each interaction, each conversation seemed to bring us a little more, gradually erasing the years of tension and misunderstandings. One Saturday morning, while I was working on a new design project in my home office, I received an unexpected message from Martine. "My darling, what would you say about a day shopping with girls? I need to renew my wardrobe and I would love to have your opinion." I stared at my phone, stunned. Martine, who had always criticized my dress style, now asked for fashion advice. It was surreal, but at the same time, so exciting. I accepted with enthusiasm. A few hours later, we wandered through the streets of the Marais, from one shop to another. Martine, whom I had always seen in classic and a little austere outfits, was surprisingly open to new styles. "What do you think of this dress, Sophie?" she asked, held in front of her a flowery summer dress, far from her usual dark tailors. "She is beautiful, Martine," I replied sincerely. "The colors would go perfectly with you." Martine disappeared in the fitting room and came out a few minutes later, transformed. The dress highlighted her silhouette and gave her complexion a shine that I had never seen him. "Oh, Martine," I exclaimed, "you are resplendent." She looked at herself in the mirror, a hesitant smile on the lips. "Do you think it is not a bit daring for a woman my age?" I shook my head vehemently. "Not at all. You are sublime. Age has nothing to do with style, it's a question of self-confidence." Martine looked at me, shiny eyes. "You're right, my darling. I think I'm going to take it." This shopping day marked a turning point in our relationship. Not only had we had a pleasant time together, but we also got to know each other in a new light. I had discovered a more relaxed, more open Martine, ready to get out of her comfort zone. The following weeks, our interactions became more and more frequent and natural. Martine called me regularly to ask me for advice on various things, from interior decoration to kitchen. For my part, I surprised myself to seek his opinion on professional questions, appreciating his perspective and his experience. One day, while I was working on a particularly difficult advertising campaign for a demanding customer, I found myself in a creative dead end. Frustrated, I decided to call Martine. "Martine," I said as soon as she got, "I need your help. I am blocked on a project and I don't know what to do." "Tell me everything, my darling," she replied immediately. I explained the situation to him, describing the client's brief and the difficulties I encountered in answering them in a creative and original way. Martine listened to me carefully, then began to ask relevant questions which forced me to consider the problem from a different angle. "You know," she said after a moment of reflection, "it reminds me of a situation that I experienced years ago, when I run the marketing department of my business." She then told me an anecdote of her professional life, a story that I had never heard before. I suddenly realized that I knew very little about Martine's career before her retirement. His story was fascinating and, more importantly, he offered me a new perspective on my own creative challenge. Inspired by our conversation, I returned to my project with a renewed energy and new ideas. A few days later, I presented my campaign to the customer, who was delighted with the result. Proud of this success, I invited Martine to lunch to thank her for her help. We ended up in a small Italian restaurant near my office. "Martine," I said once we were installed, "I wanted to thank you. Your advice really helped me unlock the situation with my client." She smiles, visibly touched. "I am happy to have been able to help you, darling. You know, it did me good to feel useful, to share my experience." We passed the rest of the lunch to discuss our respective professional experiences. I discovered a passionate, ambitious Martine, who had to fight to make a place in a corporate world dominated by men. Her journey inspired me and gave me a new appreciation of the woman she was. As the months passed, our relationship continued to strengthen. We got into the habit of seeing us regularly, sometimes just, other times with Thomas. Each meeting allowed us to discover new facets each other. One Sunday afternoon, when we took tea in Martine's garden, she approached a subject that took me by surprise. "Sophie," she said, resting her cup, "I have thought a lot lately. I was wondering if you would accept that I teach you to make pastry." I looked at her, surprised. Pastry had always been Martine's favorite area, its sacred territory in a way. The fact that she wants to share this with me was additional proof of the path we had traveled. "I would love it, Martine," I replied with enthusiasm. This is how our weekly pastry sessions began. Every Sunday afternoon, I went to Martine and she patiently taught me the art of French pastry. We started with the basics: short crust pastry, pastry cream, before tackling more complex recipes. These moments spent together in Martine's kitchen quickly became my favorites. There was something deeply intimate and comforting in creating together, sharing these gestures transmitted from generation to generation. One day, while we put the final touch to a particularly successful strawberry pie, Martine turned to me with a malicious smile. "You know," she said, "I never said that to anyone, but the recipe for this pie is actually coming from my grandmother. She was an extraordinary woman, well in advance on her time. She taught me that cooking was a form of love, a way of taking care of the people you love." I felt tears getting my eyes, touched by this confidence. "Thank you for sharing that with me, Martine. It means a lot for me." She put her hand on mine, her gaze filled with tenderness that I would never have thought to see one day. "You are like a girl for me now, Sophie. I want you to have this recipe, that you transmit it in your turn." This moment marked a new turning point in our relationship. It was no longer just a cordial agreement between mother-in-law and daughter-in-law, but a real family bond that was created. A few weeks later, when Thomas and I said to Martine, she made us an announcement that surprised us both. "The children," she said, using the dessert - one of our strawberry pies, which I had made under her supervision - I made a decision. "I will sell the house." Thomas and I exchanged a surprised look. Martine had lived in this big house since her wedding over 40 years ago. "But why, Mom?" Thomas asked, visibly worried. Martine smiles, serene air. "It's a house too big for me all alone. And then, I want to change, novelty. I found a charming apartment in the city center, closer to you." I understood then what this decision really meant. Martine was not only looking to move, she sought to get closer to us, to be part of our daily life in a more present way. "It's a wonderful idea, Martine," I say sincerely. "We will be delighted to have you closer to us." The look that Martine launched to me at that time was filled with gratitude and affection. I realized how much our relationship had evolved. What had started with an act of revenge had been transformed into a story of forgiveness, of mutual understanding and ultimately, of family love. That night, going home, Thomas took me in his arms. "I still can't believe how much things have changed," he whispered. "You have accomplished a miracle, Sophie." I shook my head, moved. "We have accomplished it together, Thomas. You, me, and Martine. We have all made efforts to work." As I fell asleep that night, I thought back to the path traveled. From the disastrous haircut to our Sunday pastry sessions, we had gone through so many trials and moments of joy. Our story was proof that even the most difficult relationships can be transformed with patience, understanding, and a lot of love. I fell asleep with a smile on their lips, grateful for this new family that we had built, and impatient to see what the future had in store for us.